Se mora sampada. First line. Pamanjari pada. Se mora sampada. Se mor bhajana pujana. Se mora pranadana, se mora avarana. Se mor jivanera jivana. Se mora rasa nidhi, se mora vancha siddhi. Se mor vedera dharma. Se brata se tapa, se mora mantra japa. Thank you. Se mor dharma karma. Anukula habividhi, se pade haibe siddhi. Mirakibo eduinayane. Se rupa madhuri rasi, prana kuvalayana sashi. Prapulita habe nishidine. Tua adarshana ahi, karale jara lodehi. Chirodina tapita jivana. You just keep on. Haha rupa koro doya, deha more padachaya. Narotama loilo sharana. Shri Rupa Manjari Pada, Se Mora Sampada. Se mor bhajana pujana. Se mor bhajana pujana. I have to admit, it sounded better in the shower this morning. And maybe I should have just read the translation so we can relish this. The feet of Rupa Manjari, Rupa Goswami's eternal form as a Manjari of Vraj, are my real wealth. They're the object of my bhajan and puja. They're the treasure of my heart, and they are my ornaments and the life of my life. They're the reservoirs of all rasa for me and the fulfillment of all my desires. They are the conclusion of the religion of the Vedas for me, and are the goal of all my vows, austerities, and the chanting of my mantra. They are the purpose of all my religious activities. By the power of those feet, my activities will become favorable to devotion. Spiritual perfection will be achieved, and with these two eyes, I will be able to actually see. The exquisite beauty of Sri Rupa Manjari's divine feet will shine like the brilliant moon upon the lotus of my heart, both day and night, thus giving relief to my afflicted soul. By the venom of the snake of separation from you, my soul has wasted away, and my life is ever afflicted and distressed. O Rupa Manjari, please be merciful, and give me the shade of your lotus feet. Narottam Das has taken refuge. Srila Rupa Goswami ki. Okay. 4th canto, 28th chapter. Pranjam becomes a woman in the next life. Text number 49. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Can you read it? His mercy is revealing it. Evam vilapatniti bala. Evam vilapanti bala. Vipane anugata patim. Vipane nugata patim. Patita Padayor Bhartu Patita Padayor Bratu Rudati Ashruni Avartayat Rudyatya Shrunya Vartayat Evam Vilapanti Bhala Vipane nugatapatim Patita padiyor bhartu Rudhatyash runyan vatartayat Evam vilapatni bhala Vipane nugatapatim Patita padiyor bhartu Rudyat Runya Vartayat. Go ahead, please. Evam Valampanti Bhala Vipane Nugatapatim Pitatapadyor Bratu Vilapani Bala Evam Vilapatni Bala Patita Padiyor Bhartu Rudyatya Shrunya Vartadyat Evam Vilapatni Bala Vipane Nugatapatim Patita Padiyor Bhartu Rudyatya Shrunya Vartadyat Evam. Thus, Vilapati, lamenting, Bala, the innocent woman, Vipane, in the solitary forest, Anugata, strictly adherent, Patim, unto her husband, Patita, fallen down, Padyo, at the feet, Bratu, of her husband, Rudati, while crying, Ashruni, tears, Avartayat, she shed. That most obedient wife thus fell down at the feet of her dead husband and began to cry pitifully in that solitary forest. Thus the tears rolled down her eyes. Please repeat. That most obedient wife thus fell down at the feet of her dead husband and began to cry pitifully in that solitary forest. Thus the tears rolled down from her eyes. One potent sentence, purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktisiddhanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. Just as a devoted wife becomes afflicted at the passing away of her husband, when a spiritual master passes away, the disciple becomes similarly bereaved. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gnananjana Salakya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadandikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shita Patakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shiva Shakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostite Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vrishabhana Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kopa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. To paraphrase a statement by His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Goswami Prabhupada, he said, four-mouthed Lord Brahma, or 1,000-mouthed Anantasesha, can hardly do credit in glorifying the Supreme Lord and His devotees. So what to speak of a fallen, insignificant fool like me? But today, I hope to give some pleasure to Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura, and all their followers. And I hope you were praying sincerely so that might take place. See, as here the disciple similarly becomes bereaved when the spiritual master leaves or passes away. In the Bhagavad Gita we hear that the wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. But these are all the temporary relationships within this world that are being referred to. In this world, we're all sojourners on the path of death. Everyone must die. Therefore, whether one is male or female, high or low, king or subject, rich or poor, learned or foolish, he can make this exceedingly rare human form of life successful by becoming a servant of the eternally pure, completely blissful Sri Hare. Even in this conditional existence, one can become liberated. Hence, it is overwhelmingly necessary to try for that. So, when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu got the association of his eternal devotee, associate, Srila Ramananda Roy, I wish I could find the little paper I'd written the 2 questions I wanted. He said, what is the most beneficial and auspicious of all activities for the living entity? And the answer, of course, was the association of the devotees of the Lord. In a purport in the following verse, Srila Prabhupada quotes from Brihad Bhagavatamrita, wherein he says that the greatest joy of life is associating with the devotees. And that when one is in separation, when one does not have the association of the devotees, one cannot enjoy even a moment of happiness. And that was in a purport to the verse, the question that was asked, what is the greatest source of suffering in this world? And Ramananda Roy said, besides separation from the devotees, I can think of nothing else. It's all these ups and downs of the material world, the dualities that are constantly thrown at the body and mind that we identify with. They're nothing. They're just coming and going just like that. But the value of the association with the devotees of the Lord is eternal. The Bhagavatam says that you can't compare anything of this world, even liberation, with just a moment's association with the pure devotees of Krishna. When we get the association of the Lord's unalloyed devotees, for the fortunate, for the sincere, there is a, how do we say that word? Seismic, earthquake-like experience within the heart. Because for the first time in our lives, transcendental sound vibration will have actually touched the soul. Balaram Prabhu was making reference to that we have to be very sharp in our Krishna consciousness, in our mind, to actually be empowered so that our words will get past the dirty filters of the mind, the intellect, what to speak of the false ego. That has to be transcendental sound vibration to do that. And if one identifies with the body, one disqualifies oneself to be a completely transparent medium of the spiritual master and the disciplic succession. It's no small task, being guru, being the unalloyed servant of the Lord. I didn't expect to say this at this time, but I'll go ahead and say it because I'll relate it to the point. Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur in his last days said, I've upset many persons' minds. Many might have considered me their enemy, because I was obliged to speak the plain truth of science and devotion towards the absolute Godhead. I've given them all those troubles only so they might turn their face toward the personality of Godhead without any desire for gain and with unalloyed devotion. Surely someday they'll be able to understand that. So those who are pure devotees of the Lord, unalloyed devotees of the Lord, they don't speak to entertain. They don't speak to cause trouble or anxiety to others. But inevitably, the pure devotees do. They agitate the mind of sometimes even the aspiring devotees. What to speak of the conditioned souls? One has to be very fortunate to embrace such thunderbolt-like words, shattering the false ego, dispelling the illusion that we're the body, that we're the enjoyer in this world, being replaced with that which is actually within the heart, but simply covered, the realization that I'm the infinitesimal servant of the servant of Lord Sri Krishna eternally. He's my Lord, and I'm His. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura is such a representative, such a devotee of the Lord. The translation for his pranams, Sri Varshavanavi Devi. I offer my respectful obeisances to Sri Varshavanavi Devi Dayatya Das, who is favored by Srimati Radharani, and who is the ocean of transcendental mercy and the deliverer of the science of Krishna. Madhuryojjvala Premadya, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, the personified energy of Sri Chaitanya's mercy, who deliver devotional service, which is enriched with the conjugal love of Radha and Krishna. I think this Ujjvala Prema is the unique love that has been brought down to this world by Lord Chaitanya through Rupa Goswami to us. The brilliant conjugal love of Radha and Krishna, coming exactly in the line of revelation of Srila Rupa Goswami. Namaste Gauravani. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, who are the personified teachings of Lord Chaitanya. You're the deliverer of the fallen souls. You do not tolerate any statement which is against the teachings of devotional service enunciated by Srila Rupa Goswami. And Dvanta Harane, you're removing the darkness that enshrouds our consciousness. So Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura, or Srila Prabhupada, or any great Vaishnava in our disciplic succession, or what to speak of ourselves, they're not islands in and of themselves. That saying, no man is an island. So when we speak of a spiritual master, automatically we mean they're a recipient of the mercy coming down through the disciplic succession. And when we glorify the spiritual master, then it automatically includes, the understanding should be there that all his glories are coming through the mercy of his spiritual master. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura, spiritual master, was Srila Gaura Kishora Das Babaji Maharaj. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. One time on a steamship, traveling somewhere to engagement for preaching, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura, with a number of devotees, was asked by a friendly person, someone who appreciated His Divine Grace. He said, you know, you're such a great and powered preacher, and it seems like there's such a dichotomy, such a difference between you and your spiritual master, who simply chants Hare Krishna, keeping away from everybody else. And he said, you know, You see the turning wheel, the paddle of the steamship, very noticeable. But what you don't see is the small battery underneath. That small battery in my life is Srila Gaura Kishora Das Babaji Maharaj. And without his empowerment, without his mercy, there would be no preaching on my part. He came to Navadvip Dham, specifically to Godrumadvip, Swananda Sukhada Kunj of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's, after having been in Vraj for 30 years. He instantly appreciated His Divine Grace Srila Satchidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And this extreme renunciant would listen to the Krishna Katha given by a householder, by a magistrate. I mean, it's about as close as you can get, externally speaking, as a penny and pounds, shilling and pence man. But the sound vibration, the qualities, as we said last time, this is what you judge a Vaishnava by. So he would associate often, in Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, as a young man, in his 20s, saw Srila Gaura Kishora Das Babaji Maharaj. And we know that it didn't take long, a year, a little more, year and a half, whatever, before he took shelter of Srila Gaura Kishora Das Babaji as a surrendered disciple. These are words that are so wonderful to hear in his glorification of his spiritual master, in considering what his plight was. He said, Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur said, when out of false ego I was thinking I'm a great scholar of mathematics and philosophy, let any big pundit come at any time, day or night, and I'll cut his propositions to pieces. At that time, I got the darshan of the lotus feet of Sri Gurudev. He ignored everything that was previously appreciated in me, my truthfulness, my moral and pious life, and my intellectualism, knowing them to be of little value. When I saw that he ignored whatever was good in me, I realized how good he himself must be. Who could neglect so many good qualities in me? What inconceivable wealth he possessed. Being neglected by him, I understood that there was no one more fallen and contemptible than myself. That was my actual identity. The very things that I judged as important, such as scholarship and upright character, this exalted soul regarded as valueless. I apprehended that within him, this noble personality possessed priceless treasure. I then pondered that either he's extremely puffed up or is exceedingly merciful. I then haughtily said to my Gurudev, you are a worshipper of that cheater and debauched Krishna, so why would you be compassionate to someone like me, dedicated to ordinary mortality? Humbly and sincerely I prayed to the Supreme Lord for His mercy. Later, by His grace, I recognized that without receiving the blessings of this peerless saint, and without serving him, nothing good could happen to me. When I accepted that and acted accordingly, and then received the causeless, unlimited grace of my Sri Gurudev and refuge at his lotus feet, I deemed my life fulfilled. It's a great beginning when we take shelter of a devotee in disciplic succession. It's the beginning of life, beginning of our spiritual life, second birth. It's proper utilization of the human form that we find ourselves in. We know the story of hesitancy, etc., of Gaura Kishora, but he did accept him as a disciple because of his determination and seriousness, sincerity. And he asked him, stay with me. Don't go anywhere. You remember that was his first objection to accepting his disciple. Yeah, I tried that once, and the fellow ran away. I won't accept any more disciples. So he said, come to me. Stay with me. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura did that. And he said, on receiving a jerk of the lotus feet of Sri Gurudev for the span of 1 year, I lost all sense of this external cosmos. I do not know whether any transcendental agent equal to him has ever appeared in this plane. How may those who are preoccupied with worldly lust, anger, and so on ever know him? If we surrender our lives to the spiritual master, this should be our realization, that this world is just a misty mirage, that it has no eternal value, not for me. It's not my home, it's anartha, it's unwanted. We can make the best use of it under the guidance and shelter of the spiritual master and Shastra and the Vaishnavas. But that's to get us to being completely cleansed, to reawakening our love for Krishna. And at that point, it doesn't matter if we're here, there, or anywhere. At that point, you'll simply be at the lotus feet of the Lord. And, of course, that means with all his associates. Perfection of life, ever increasingly, ever expandingly blissful. So, in his life, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura was very fortunate that he had a father like Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He was his spiritual preceptor. He showed him the path. He gave him his first set of japa beads. You might hear this, Dravida Prabhu. You might not have ever heard this. We all know that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura took a vow to chant 1 billion names. Did you know that Bhaktivinoda Thakur also fulfilled such a vow? A lot of nectar in this book. And the very beads that he chanted those billion names on, he gave to his son at an early age. Gave him the Nishinga mantra, if I'm not mistaken. Srila Prabhupada in the purport in the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita says, by the transcendental system, there are those fortunate souls who are born in the family of acharyas. He said, my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Goswami Prabhupada is one, and I was also fortunate to be born in such a family, to have a pure devotee as a father. And he said, by the transcendental system, they were brought together. So Bhaktisiddhanta Bimala Prasad was guided by his father throughout his life. His father was one said, you take shelter of Gaura Kishora Das Babaji. Insisted upon it. Don't come back without having done so. And it's interesting to note that he spent a year with Srila Gaura Kishora Das Babaji, Maharaja, serving him faithfully. And after a year's time, he went back to the Association of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and he took up the service of Sridham Mayapur and the service of spreading, teaching the message of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Bhaktivinoda Thakur more than once instructed Bhaktisiddhanta that it's an injury to yourself and to others to simply do nirjana bhajan, to simply take care of your own spiritual life and to chant Hare Krishna, even in the Dham. The dire necessity of spreading Krishna consciousness to the conditioned souls. It supersedes every other duty. And he taught his son, you have to take to this task. So Gaura Kishora Das Babaji Maharaj, he understood this, even though he himself chanted alone. A prime instruction that he received, that he gave to Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura, one that he held to his heart for the rest of his life, was preach the absolute truth, keeping aside all other activities. And it's very interesting because that seemingly contradicts with the three instructions that I've shared with you before that he gave him. Don't make any disciples. Don't associate with anyone, and certainly don't go to the world of Maya, Calcutta. But he was never fooled by the apparent words of his spiritual master, because he was fully blessed by his spiritual master. Then he always understood the purport. He never accepted one single disciple, although externally he accepted 60,000 disciples. But he always took them to be his Prabhus, who were enlivening him, teaching him because of their enthusiasm in hearing Krishna Katha and surrendering in service to the Lord. In any way in which he could serve them, he did to the best of his ability. Not to associate with anyone. He took everyone's association as being the mercy of his guru. He saw his guru in everyone. So whatever way in which they would come at him, he would think in these absolute terms. So he was not taking on the qualities of these individuals, the conditioned souls that he was preaching to. He was reciprocating in service to his Guru Maharaj, which means preaching. Troubling so many people. Taking them by the shoulders and shaking them, as the example may be given. He even said on one Vyasa Puja, I may go to hell for this arrogance of sitting on a seat like this and preaching so strongly the message of Lord Chaitanya. But what can I do? These are the instructions of Lord Chaitanya and my spiritual master to preach to everyone you meet this message. And if I appear to be arrogant, if I appear to offend, if my lot will be to go to hell because of this, then I'm prepared to pay that price. In fact, I'm willing to sign the contract. Go ahead, give it to me. I gladly will sign it. That if in serving my Guru Maharaj's instructions, I have to go to hell, so be it. This is the determination of the moon-like devotees of our disciplic succession. They don't care the price in their personal life. They're not interested in their own happiness. As the Brahmins ended up realizing after seeing their wise example, to hell with our being Brahmins, to hell with our sadhana, to hell with so many things. We didn't surrender life and soul to Krishna. The opportunity was presented. We didn't take advantage of it. One of the absolute statements that I found very jarring yesterday reading, day before whenever I read it, was that he said, when one accepts a spiritual master, one should accept him in toto. Whatever he instructs, you accept that. If you don't have that kind of surrender, and if you don't engage in that kind of hearing from the pure devotee, from the spiritual master, then you will be a victim of your mind going, I like this, I don't like that instruction. That's asking too much of me. I can't do that. And if one does that with any of the instructions of the spiritual master, then one has not actually surrendered to the spiritual master. One remains a servant, a slave of the dictates of his mind. That statement is an all or nothing statement. It's an absolute statement. And we know the deep purport of it. It's a gradual process to Krishna consciousness, and most of us do not surrender in a moment. But that's to be understood to be the standard. Full surrender. Body, mind, and words to the spiritual master. Now he took the vrat, 300,000 names, and he simultaneously managed the Yogpit, writing books, commentaries, translating, etc., making disciples during that time period. Incredible. Eating only once. You don't waste any time when you have that kind of vow and do all these other things. Like Hanuman, you hear in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, he could do like several things at the same time, it appeared, to Gopakumar. Non-stop. One time when his body had been somewhat sick and they were saying, slow down, Guru Maharaj. You need to rest. Or no, the host, where he would spend the night, said, you know, you've been speaking for a long time, maybe you should rest. And he said, when we hear and chant the glories of Krishna, that is resting. Everything else is laborious and tiresome. His norm was speaking a couple hours. I mean, that was a short class. You couldn't stop him. Like Srila Prabhupada, he was always glorifying Krishna in all circumstances, to everybody. On the balcony of his house there in Mayapur, many of you know of that house. Somebody walks by in the evening and he couldn't see who it was. Who goes there? It is I, Guru Maharaj. Blah, blah, blah. Said, who is that I? Are you the body? Are you the mind? Are you the soul? The servant of Krishna. Always seeing Krishna. Always glorifying Krishna. In terms of going to Calcutta, to touch up on that last instruction, he never left the Dham. As Srila Prabhupada never left the presence of his spiritual master. Maharaj quoted it in the last class that he gave in the morning time. Srila Prabhupada said, I'm sitting in the lap of Krishna. There's twice that Gaura Kishora Das Babaji Maharaj, I got to set this up nicely, it's so good, I hope you'll bear with me. One person came and examined Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura, saw his external activities of service and deemed that he wasn't the kind of example he wanted to follow. Let me go to Gaura Kishora Das Babaji Maharaj, who would simply sit and chant. Yeah, that's what I want to be. And so he began to serve him. And as Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur has said, he accepted many people, he allowed many people to sit there, stay there, what have you, even giving many of them the impression that they were dear to him, close to him, that they were actual surrendered followers of his. But most of them were being cheated because they were not willing to surrender fully, as Gaura Kishora Das Babaji Maharaj was doing himself and expected of anyone who would follow his instructions. That person's name was Madhu, sometimes called Mitra. And he kind of became, the servant of Gaura Kishora Das Babaji. And sometimes Bhaktisiddhanta would come to visit him, come across the river, go to Kulia and visit Bhaktisiddhanta. And seeing him come, that Madhu would take the door of the hut, the latrine, whatever, and he would close it, not letting Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur have darshan. And Bhaktisiddhanta a number of times bowed down, paying prostrated obeisances from a distance. One time he came bearing some fruits, some vegetables grown over in Mayapur, which Gaura Kishora Das Babaji Maharaj relished. He would accept them, he would touch them to his head and his chest, knowing them to be the mercy of the Dham, the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. And so when he brought some like this Madhu said, "You can't see Gaura Kishora Das Babaji Maharaj. He's indisposed," closing the door. And Bhaktisiddhanta said, "At least tell him I'm here." And Gaura Kishora heard that and said, "Who is that? Who's there?" And he revealed himself. He expressed who he was. And he came out. He said, "So many people are coming and bothering me, trying to get the dust of my lotus feet. So many hypocrites." And then he personally took dust from his feet and then he rubbed it on the head of his disciple. Of course, this was smashing the false pride of Madhu. But you know how Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura reacted? He thought that his guru was making fun of him, that he was a hypocrite, that he was the man being described. And he left soon after that. And a month later, he came back, and Gaura Kishora Das Babaji Maharaj made the same complaint. He said, "Go get Kedarnath. Bring him from Calcutta. Tell him I'm being so harassed by all these hypocrites." And Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura replied, "Are you trying to test me, Guru Maharaj? If the glories of the dust you placed upon my head still has effect, then I will not fall prey to the trick you've laid for me. I know, surely you're testing me, whether I know, that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he is only a resident on the banks of Radhakund. He's not in Calcutta. And you similarly are always a resident on the banks of Radhakund. The purport being, you two are never separated. What to speak of being in Maya, the kingdom of Maya." And Gaura Kishora Das Babaji was so happy to hear that. So happy. Blessing his spiritual master. The blessings of the spiritual master are everything. They're everything. Without them, we're nothing. We have no hope in Krishna consciousness. It's no secret how to get them. So while chanting a billion names of the Lord, Bhaktivinoda Thakur passed away. A year and some months later, Gaura Kishora Das Babaji Maharaj passed away. Hare Krishna. Let's see if I can get the exact quote. If not, I'll have to paraphrase. But after they both left him, he said, "Who will now chastise me? Who will slap me, keeping me in line? Who will proofread? Who will listen to the commentary that I've given on Scripture? Who will I report the activities of my preaching to be instructed, to be encouraged to carry on?" He saw the life, his life, he saw the universe void. And after having entombed Gaura Kishora Das Babaji Maharaj, we know the pastime, he went back to Mayapur, and for days he was totally morose, crying, bereft. And one night at the Yogpit, he got the mercy. He had a vision of Lord Chaitanya and all his associates, the Panchatattva and many of the eternal associates of the Lord, the 6 Goswamis, Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and his own spiritual master, Srila Gaura Kishora Das Babaji Maharaj. They all came, revealing themselves to him. And they go, Saraswati, why are you worrying? Begin the task of establishing Shuddha Bhakti. Distribute Gauravani universally, the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Expand the service to Gauranam, Gauradam, and Gaurakam. The name, the abode, and the transcendental desires of Lord Chaitanya. With unbreached enthusiasm, broadcast Bhaktisiddhanta, the conclusion, the perfection of bhakti. We are eternally with you, ready to help. The support of unlimited people, immeasurable opulence, and boundless scholarship awaits the blessing to serve your mission. All will manifest when required. Come forward with full strength to distribute the message of Mahaprabhu's Prema Dharma throughout the globe. No worldly hindrance or menace will be able to obstruct this undertaking of yours. We are forever with you. Very, very shortly thereafter, he took sannyas. Sometimes it's not understood how revolutionary and questionable that was at that day and time. Nobody took sannyas among Lord Chaitanya's followers. They all took the external, at least the external appearance of Babaji, imitating generally the behavior, the appearance of the Goswamis of Vrindavan, Rupa Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami. But he wanted to show, he substantiated it, he and his followers substantiated it by Shastra. Lord Chaitanya himself took sannyas. Prabodhananda Saraswati took sannyas. But it says in Kali Yuga it's not accepted. He said that's in a Rajasic Purana. That was quoted by Lord Chaitanya, 5 things to avoid: offering cows, committing that as sacrifice. He said he was quoting that verse to get the Nawab to stop killing cows. He said, you Hindus kill cows. What's the problem? That was the purport of that verse Lord Chaitanya emphasized. It's incidental that it says no sannyas. That Rajasic Purana is for the smartas, for the karma Brahmins, those who are desirous of heavenly pleasures. For them, sannyas is a joke. They should not take it. But for the Vaishnav, I take sannyas to show my realization I'm just a servant of my Paramahamsa Guru. I'm not a Paramahamsa, I'm a servant of the Paramahamsa. And by dedicating my body, mind, and words to the service of my Paramahamsa Guru, then I can become Krishna conscious. To the 3 sticks he added the little one on top, which he considered to be like an axe to chop away the forest-like bramble bushes and thorns that surround all the conditioned soul's heart. And with renewed enthusiasm, he began to preach the message of Lord Chaitanya. Throughout India, Assam, etc., sent the devotees he sent to England. He actually, it said in this book that he hoped that they would continue on to America. I'd never heard that. When he passed away, it was announced on the national radio in India. There are meetings for the next 2 or 3 weeks throughout India of people coming together and glorifying Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura. He had touched the lives of millions of people. They knew this was a Vaikuntha man. He was the representative of the glories of the culture of India. There are some words that I'll share with you, if I may, in his last days. And then we'll wind it up. One is that he would glorify the seven-tongued flame of Sankirtan, which is basically the breakdown of the glories of the holy name in the first verse of Shashastika. And each one was considered a flaming tongue, the glorification of the names. Cheto Darpana Marjanam, cleansing the mirror of the heart. Bhava Mahag Devagni Nirvapanam, extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence. Shreya Karaiva Chandrika Vitaranam, one receives the benediction of pure devotional service, compared to moonshine spreading the white lily of good fortune. Vidya Vadu Jivanam, it's the life and soul of all knowledge. The devotee receives the benediction of knowledge of his eternal identity. Anandam Buddhivardhana, expanding the blissful ocean of transcendental bliss, of life, transcendental life. Purnamritasvadana, tasting nectar at every step. Sarvatma Snapana, the self is wholly cleansed of all desires other than this selfless devotional service. And he said that in the Gaudiya Mutt temples, the Gaudiya Mutts, this sacrifice of the flame of these seven activities of glorification of Krishna's name should burn eternally. Even when the fire of universal devastation takes place, this fire will shine brightly, extolling to one and all that this is our business. We've received unlimited mercy from the Lord, and to receive even more, we're meant to share it. He blessed everyone, all of you present and absent, accept my blessings. Remember that our sole duty and dharma is to propagate service to the Lord and His devotees. I don't think time will permit that I go through the disappearance pastime, but needless to say, it's worth mentioning the last lecture he gave on his bed. He was on his bed at this time in Calcutta, body worn. It's actually Leela, feigning or going through the effects of a heart attack, because he wasn't happy with the majority of his disciples being Kanishtas, not taking up the preaching mission, not selflessly surrendering. And so he was there in Calcutta, Bagh Bazar, and a few disciples around him, and for an hour he spoke so enthusiastically, so energetically that his cheeks became red, and the main point of it was, don't be a hypocritical disciple of the spiritual master. The last words that he said at 5:30 a.m. on this day, January 1st, 1937, he went, oh, Krishna, Krishna. And departed, leaving behind his teachings, leaving behind the example that he had set for one and all, giving us the opportunity to follow the instruction of Rupa Goswami, Utsahan Nischayadaya, Tat Tat Karma Pavartana, Sangatyagat Satovrite. We should follow in the footsteps of these great acharyas. We're instructed to do so. And you can do it conscientiously, or you can sleepwalk through it. Prabhupada in the purport to that verse says this whole morning program, you were pointing it out yesterday. Those who weren't here, did you get to listen to that class? Balarama had that hope. Give 10 years to your life. But another important point was this morning program, Prabhupada said, getting up by 4, going to Mongol Artik, chanting your rounds, worshipping the spiritual master, Tulsi, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. He said, these are the activities that the previous acharyas performed. This is the instructions they've given us. And if we conscientiously perform them, they will be pleased, and they will bless us, and they will empower us. Fool that we are, ignorant, covered, aspiring devotees that we are, the impossible can happen. Any questions or comments? Good question. Yes, Madhu, what happened to that fella? Offended Bhaktisiddhanta, a hypocrite. People would bring fruits, milks, sweets to Gaura Kishora. You know what he'd do with them? Take them themselves. And when they asked, did he accept them? Did he enjoy them? Yeah, he loved them. Such a hypocrite. And shortly, oh my God. Yeah, he became a sense enjoyer, a womanizer, in the dress of Babaji. Such a hypocrite. And when, after one of the times Bhaktisiddhanta saying that, after Gaura Kishora Das Babaji saying that to Bhaktisiddhanta, glorifying him, and I'm surrounded by it, he turned to him, he said, "Go home. Give up this nonsense. Take up an honest work. Chant Hare Krishna at home. Quit being..." And he actually did it. And it's a nice footnote. The chastisement of the spiritual master is the mercy of the spiritual master. When we say he left 10 years earlier, that's the words of Bhaktisiddhanta himself. I had 10 years more worth of work to do in Braj. But because of all these neophyte disciples, I'm leaving early. But when he says something like that, it's actually for the upliftment of the disciples. Take it seriously. These admonishments, they're for our good. And we accept it, if we accept it in the mood like Guru does it in his presence of his Guru, then that's perfect. One last thing, I promise. One devotee initiated by Bhaktisiddhanta, Harinam. Bhaktisiddhanta leaves the planet. We heard yesterday how so much chaos takes place when the Paramahamsa leaves amongst his followers and disciples. So much. This devotee left the association. He started taking up nonsense activities, even eating meat, not chanting his rounds. He passed away, taken to the court of Yamaraj. Terrified. Everything we hear in 5th canto, he experienced it, the long scorching path to Yamaloka. I'm thirsty, can I get something to drink? Sure, right there. The pool they pointed to was full of vomit, stool, mucus. So he was crushed. Oh, he knew what was going on. These figures of the Yamadutas were so hideous and they were huge. Oh, So he waits in line patiently. Everyone in front of him in line. Chitragupta looks, take him to this hellish planet, this hellish punishment. All of them went to hellish planets. Yamaloka, that particular, Yamaraj is in a beautiful place, a palace, but take them to be tortured else, the hellish planets we hear of. When it got to him, Chitragupta looked at his karma, his life, said, I better give this to Yamaraj. And he gives it to Yamaraj. They take him before Yamaraj. And he asked him, is there anything, did you do anything good in this life? He had asked him a few questions, and he couldn't speak because he was so terrified. But when he asked that question, he said, I got initiated by Srila Prabhupada. Yamaraj bowed his head, closing his eyes, and immediately Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura appeared. And Yamaraj said, what should we do? And immediately Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura laid into him, you rascal, how could you give up chanting? Taking up non-devotional activities like eating meat. He fell at his feet begging for forgiveness. What do you think happened? He blessed him. He forgave him. He said, you go back to Madhava Maharaj. You take shelter of him. Next thing he knows, he wakes up. I didn't say this part. On the pile of logs they were about to light to burn that body. Yelling, Prabhupada! Prabhupada! Everybody ran off thinking a ghost had inhabited him. He was dead. He ran back home and he told him, I'm finished. I'm done. I'm going to Calcutta. My Guru Maharaj has given me service and instruction. He took shelter of a exalted disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta, Madhava Maharaj. He came in to explain what he'd been instructed, and Madhava Maharaj said, no need to say, I know what you and I are meant to do. And he gave him a new set of japa beads. And for the next 8 years he chanted Hare Krishna day and night. He took the human form of life seriously, became a wonderful devotee. Let's not chance being taken to the court of Yamaraj. Let's not force the spiritual master to come back to deliver us in hell or in future births. Let's really take advantage of the mercy now. Srila Prabhupada ki, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura ki, Srila Gaura Kishora Das Babaji Maharaj ki, Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki, Samaveda Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki. No. The question was, is that story in the book? No, it was told on the disappearance anniversary of Madhava Maharaj. It's on a site called Simha Guru, Lion Guru, some glorification of Bhaktisiddhanta. And what triggered it in my memory, I was talking to a friend of mine, a disciple of Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj, who related that story. A little slight difference in some details, but that was written and it had more depth to it, so that's the one I went with. That's posted online. The mercy of the spiritual master. Hare Krishna. Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur passed away at Bagh Bazaar. Yeah, he left his body there. Yeah. It's the same kind of thing of why would he leave in Calcutta when he could have been in Mayapur? But he was in Mayapur. Why did Srila Prabhupada not stop to pay obeisances at the samadhi of his spiritual master whenever he came to Sri Mayapur Chandra Daya Mandir? His godbrothers criticized him for it. He said, do you think there's a moment I'm not with my spiritual master? You know, there's a big difference. Realization, and that's the answer I would give. Yeah. Yeah. Triveda Prabhu is saying some devotees think he left this world in Jagannath Puri, but he had been there ill, and he was telling. One devotee asked, "Why don't you build up something here in Jagannath Puri? You know, you've done so many wonderful services elsewhere in India, but why don't we?" He said, "What can I do? Time is over." And then they took him to Calcutta. Thank you, Davida. Yeah, I got to see the printing press there in their museum. It had been sold, but they got it back. The printing press that he installed right where the deities could have darshan of the printing of his books, the books. Because Vaisheshika was there, they gave that darshan. I got to tag along. The museum's open now. Anyone can see it now.